Hello friends, welcome to Bank Express Academy. In this video, we will take a look at Incoterms 2020, what they mean, their application and the benefits of using them. Incoterms means International Commercial Terms. Incoterms are developed and published by International Chamber of Commerce or ICC. They define the risk and responsibility of a shipment between the buyer and the seller. They are used to avoid the misunderstanding in foreign trade contracts by clarifying the tasks, costs, and risks. They are widely recognized and used and help reduce disputes by clearly outlining who is responsible for the transportation cost, insurance, and risk associated with the shipment of goods. Incoterms 2020 consists of 11 terms and are grouped into two categories or rules. Rule 1 is applicable for any mode of transport, whereas Rule 2 applies to sea and inland waterway transport. In the first group, we have 7 Incoterms. They are EXW, FCA, CPT, CIP, DAP, DPU, and DDP. So, let's start with the first Incoterm, EXW. EXW means ex-works or ex-warehouse. In ex-works, the seller is only responsible for ensuring that the cargo is packaged so it is ready for export and the goods can be collected from their location. The risk or liability for the goods transfers to the buyer when the goods are made available at the agreed upon place. The buyer bears all risk and cost once they collect the goods from the seller's location. Now going for Incoterm number 2, FCA, which means free carrier. In FCA, the seller is responsible for the export clearance and the delivery of goods to the carrier at the named place of delivery. The place of delivery can be the seller's premises or any other place. Risk is transferred to the buyer once delivery is made to the selected place of or location. Third term is CPT, which means carriage price paid to. In a CPT Incoterm, the seller is responsible for clearing the goods for export and paying the freight charges to the destination. The risk is transferred from the seller to the buyer as soon as the goods are delivered to the first carrier, even if there are multiple transportations. If insurance is required, it should be arranged by the buyer. The seller is not responsible for any damages if the buyer has not insured the products because the goods have already been transferred to the first carrier. Now going to Incoterm number 4, CIP. CIP stands for carriage and insurance paid to. Remember, in CPT, insurance was not included. In CIP, the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to the destination, the cost of international freight, as well as insurance fees and charges. Therefore, CIP is similar to CPT except that in CIP, the seller is also responsible for arranging insurance. Now we will go to Incoterm number 5, DAP. DAP means delivered at place. Under DAP, the seller is responsible for all costs and risks associated with the delivery of the goods to the final destination, which will be usually the buyer's premises. The risk transfers from seller to buyer when the goods are available for unloading at the destination. The buyer is then responsible for unloading the goods at the end destination. Our sixth Incoterm is DPU. DPU stands for Delivered at Place Unloaded. In DPU, the seller is responsible for all costs and risks until the goods are delivered at the named destination place, which is usually close to the buyer. Unlike in DAP, the seller is also responsible for unloading the goods at the destination. In fact, DPU is the only Incoterm rule that requires the seller to unload goods at the place of destination. The risk transfers from seller to buyer after unloading at the destination. Moving right along, Incoterm number 7, DDP, which means Delivery Duty Paid. Here, the seller is responsible for arranging carriage and delivering the goods at the named place cleared for import and all applicable taxes and duties paid. Risk transfers from seller to buyer when the goods are made available to the buyer ready for unloading from the arriving means of transport. Till now we were discussing Incoterms under category 1. Now it's time for category 2, that's rules for sea and inland waterways transport. In this category, our first Incoterm is FAS. FAS stands for Free Alongside Ship. In FAS, the seller is liable and responsible for all the procedures in their country until the goods are delivered alongside the ship or at the terminal warehouse. FAS indicates that the risk transfers to the buyer when the goods are placed alongside the ship. The buyer is responsible for loading the freight onto the vessel as well as handling local carriage, discharge, import formalities and duties, and onward carriage to the final destination. Now it's time for Incoterm number 2 under category number 2, which is FOB. FOB is also known as free on board. In FOB, the seller's obligations are fulfilled when the goods pass the ship's rail at the port of shipment. The seller clears the goods for export and ensures that they are delivered to and loaded into the vessel of transport at the named port of departure. The risk transfers from the seller to the buyer when the goods are on board the vessel, and the buyer bears costs from that point on forward. The buyer arranges all the other costs, including insurance if required, to the cargo's ultimate destination. With that, it's time for our third Incoterm under category 2, CFR. CFR stands for Cost and Freight. CFR is an Incoterm that is exclusive to ocean freight shipping. In CFR, the seller is not only responsible for delivering the goods to the port specified by the buyer, but also bears the transportation costs of the goods to the destination port. The risk passes from the seller to the buyer when the seller delivers the goods on board the ship. The seller is not responsible for procuring marine insurance against the risk of loss or damage to the cargo during transit. And now it's time for our last Incoterm, CIF, that stands for Cost, Insurance and Freight. It is similar to CFR, but here the seller is also responsible for insuring the goods in transit. The risk is transferred to the buyer at the time the goods are on board. The buyer assumes all risks once the goods are on board the vessel for the main carriage. However, they don't bear any cost until the freight arrives at the named port of destination. Friends, hope you found this video on Incoterms 2020 useful and informative. To watch more such videos, please like, share and subscribe to our channel, Bankers Plus Academy. Thank you.